Good evening, everyone. Chip Cooper for FTC Guardian and my partner and sidekick, Alan Cutts. Here we are, the first hangout in the month of September 2019. And we're going to test here to make sure you can see me and see the screen okay. I'm operating not on my normal webcam. I'm using the built-in webcam of my laptop computer because I had a few issues just before we signed in. So, Alan, see if they can see me, hear me, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, give us a quick yes if you can see us and hear us, and you can see the screen okay. Just to let us know, please. Just give us a yes, and we're good. Okay, we're good. We're good.
Okay, everything's good. Before we get started, just a quick note here. As you probably know, I live in Northeast Florida. We had a hurricane that blew by us, Hurricane Dorian, probably 100 miles offshore. So we were in great shape. We didn't really have many of the impacts, very little surge, maybe 50 mile an hour, 60 mile an hour sustained winds for a few hours, but no big deal. And then, of course, our friends and neighbors up in North Carolina and beyond got a lot worse, and the people in the Bahamas in certain areas, it looked like, a total disaster. It's just an incredible situation. So we're very fortunate. And I was just telling Alan here as we were getting ready for the hurricane, we don't pray that the hurricane will not hit us, right? Because if you do that, it means you're praying that it's going to hit your neighbors to the south or north, right? So the praying goes on afterwards when you see who really got the rough end of it, like some of the people I just mentioned. So we're okay, but there's still another couple of months to go in hurricane season. So you never know what's going to happen. So Alan, what have you been up to?
Not much. It's just been a really busy fall, actually, just traveling and stuff. And Di and I this weekend, we're excited. It's the little things you get excited about. Some of you don't know, but Di and I are kind of working our way towards my wife retiring and actually being able to travel more and create the RV lifestyle. We want to head out and just venture across the U.S. and try to find a place to live, find a place we want to go forever. So this weekend is the Hershey RV show, which is actually the largest RV and recreational vehicle show in the North America, supposedly. So we're going to go out there and search around and see if we can find the perfect RV for the Cutts family to live in for a year or more. So we're excited. I mean, we've never been to an RV show, so it's the little thing we're excited about it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And I want to point out, for those of you who don't know, Chip lives on Amelia Island, which is right on the coast. So you could damn near see the ocean from his house. So when a hurricane blows through, he's got a front row seat to a lot of it. So he's right there. Yeah. We're very fortunate. Chip is out there when a hurricane blows through. Chip is out there like this, trying to decide which way is it going to go.
Exactly. So we're very fortunate, and we've had to evacuate once, and after that, I swore I'd never do it again. So on the way home from evacuating, I bought a generator and got a real special hookup from an electrician and all that. So we're very well prepared. But anyway,
you're on the third floor too, right? You're on the third floor.
Yeah,
so
if we get flooded out in our condo on the third floor, the entire state will be underwater. So it'll be bad. So we've been very fortunate. So let's get moving on with the presentation here. You can see from this title slide, we're talking about this epic $5 billion settlement between the FTC and Facebook. And, you may have read about it. You may have seen it on TV, that sort of thing. But you may think that it has very little impact on you. I mean, after all, what has a big settlement with Facebook got to do with you? Well, if you're involved in online advertising, particularly with respect to advertising on Facebook, or if you're thinking about doing it, it will definitely have some impact. So that's why we selected this topic, give you some background about the settlement that's interesting to know, but also point out some things that could directly affect you. So let's get started. And you know that we're going to have this simple housekeeping announcement that you've seen before. The presentation is for informational purposes only. It is not legal advice, and we are not affiliated with the Federal Trade Commission. All right, so here's a little bit of background on this settlement that occurred about a month ago. Back in 2012, there was a prior settlement that was entered into a court and made a court order, an order of the court. So it's not just a settlement agreement between the FTC and Facebook. It's a settlement agreement that's been adopted by a court, a judge, and made a court order, which means that violation of a court order can be a very serious offense. So let me give you a quick background summary of what that 2012 court order said. You've got to give consumers a clear and prominent notice about getting their consent before sharing their information, right? Number two, you have to have a comprehensive privacy program. And number three, obtain biennial privacy audits. So those were the three keys to the 2012 settlement. And the problem is that with the new settlement, the court determined that points 1 and 2 had been violated. So now we have something very serious, 2 points that were violated of a court order. So it really gives the FTC a lot of leverage. And what really was one of the interesting factors leading up to this settlement in 2019, this year, of course, just a month ago, was a year ago, what is known generally as the data privacy awakening that all involved the discovery in 2018 of this huge event known as Cambridge Analytica. So what you see here under the main headline on this slide, 87 million Facebook profiles were harvested without permission of the users and used in the 2016 elections. So when this finally became known in 2018, it caused a huge uproar and a great deal of concern among just about everybody in the United States. And because of that, we refer to this as the Great Privacy Awakening. And of course, you may remember, and if you look closely at this picture, you'll see the little guy at the table is Mark Zuckerberg. He is the Facebook CEO, and at that time, he was testifying before, I think, both houses of Congress. This, I think, was in the Senate, and you can see the great interest of the press there in front of him. It was a huge event, a huge spectacle. So you had this in addition to these 2 violations of a court order. So you see the date at the top of this slide, July 24th of this year, the 3 key elements of this settlement. One, a $5 billion unprecedented penalty, far beyond anything that the FTC had ever levied before. And then number 2, a privacy structure overhaul, essentially, at Facebook. And if you look in the left margin, you'll see that Zuckerberg himself was removed as privacy decision maker. He was the one in total control of everything back at the time of the 2012 order, and of course during the Cambridge Analytical situation, and they decided to replace him with the committee. So Zuckerberg is out as the privacy decision maker. And then finally, there are new tools in place arising out of this settlement for the FTC to monitor Facebook. And these tools we'll talk about in just a minute or two. This is what will impact you if you're involved in Facebook advertising. So the first 2 major points here of the settlement are interesting to know, but the last one we're going to dive into a little bit because it may directly impact you. And here is the slide, and I call these impacts flow down terms that to affect advertisers, which could be you, right? And the real key to it is that the one of the key elements of this settlement is that Facebook is now required to be accountable, required to take responsibility for the actions of third parties. Of course, the first party would be the users and advertisers, or the users, and the third parties would be contractors, programmers, and advertisers, right? So you would be, as an advertiser, a third party, and one of the basic core concepts of this settlement is for Facebook to take responsibility for your compliance with their terms of service, which we abbreviate TOS here. So we'll look at the bullet points in red and go down, and then I'll ask Alan to jump in and give his 2 cents worth as to how it might directly affect you as an advertiser. So first, advertisers are going to be forced to disclose their data practices. So if you're an advertiser on the Facebook platform, you'll be asked to describe whether you have a data security policy, for example. And we've been preaching pretty significantly here for the last couple of years that small businesses need to get serious about a data security policy. We have 2 of these in our members area. One, a beginning policy, we call it a developmental policy, and the other one, a more comprehensive one for larger companies that have a defined management structure. So this might be something that you take a look at very quickly. Number 2, advertisers are going to have to self-certify that they are in compliance with the Facebook terms of service. So it's really requiring not only Facebook to become accountable, but now the advertisers have got to, instead of just clicking on that you agree with terms of service that you may not have even read, now you're going to have to read them, and you're going to have to self-certify that you're in compliance with them, right? And then number 3, there is monitoring here in order to ensure advertiser compliance with the terms of service, TOS, annual reviews, annual audits, right? And then finally, Facebook has to become involved in enforcement of its terms of service, meaning that they need to, as a result of these reviews and audits, they need to terminate anyone who is in violation of their terms of service, which to my knowledge, they've never done it. They've never been this active. They've never been involved in reviews and audits or requiring any advertiser or any other third party to self-certify compliance with their TOS. Now they're up to their eyeballs in this sort of activity. And if they determine that you as an advertiser are not in compliance, even after you have self-certified that you are in compliance, they can terminate you. So in essence, the FTC, by virtue of Facebook's violation of this court order, has essentially turned Facebook into the new sheriff in town, right? The Facebook has really become almost sort of like an enforcement arm of the Federal Trade Commission, forcing Facebook to be very, very serious about responsibility and accountability, and that will flow down to all third parties on the platform, including advertisers. So I'm going to ask Alan if he'll jump in here now and give a little information as to how he views all of this coming down. Obviously, Alan sort of lives in the Facebook in terms of advertising. He lives there. He he almost lives there. So he knows what he's talking about. He's an expert. So Alan, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, and it's not just Facebook. I mean, there's Facebook, and I'll tell you, YouTube. I do a lot of advertising for clients across a lot of different mediums. Facebook, obviously, Pinterest, YouTube, Google. You know, the ad networks as well as Google Display Network, all that, and it's come down to where you need to have all your ducks in a row. And I'll give you an example. This was on YouTube about a month ago. We were trying to get some ads approved. And all of a sudden we start to see a delay in our ads being approved. And what they were, because I had to go to my ad person. And basically what we had to do is we had to go and show our terms of service, terms of use, privacy policy, and all that kind of stuff. At least show them a link to where this stuff was to the YouTube people, to the rep, in order to get the ads approved. Because once we run ads quite a bit, so normally they're approved within a day or two, and these didn't. And that's what happened is that we just had to show them all of our stuff. And I can see this happening across Facebook, across everybody. And what you're going to see is, as an agency like we run, it's another reason to be a certified for FTC compliance in through like ours, because I think as far as I know, we have the only FTC as a certification for agencies. As far as I know, we're the only ones that have any kind of certification for agencies. So if you can show, if you're an agency and you're running ads, that you are certified in FTC compliance, it's another, quill on your hat and a bullet that you can say, look, we're certified, and that your customers, because you're working with your customers, you can say, look, my customers have all this stuff in order. We have a member, Pol, P-O-L. He's from Canada, but I believe he lives somewhere in the Northwest, I believe now. And he runs all of his clients through FTC Guardian. And the reason he does it is because he advertises for them, and he can make sure that they've got all their ducks in a row when it comes to doing advertising, all the data stuff and everything else. The other thing that I'll throw out there is this whole data thing has really, really been cranked up the Richter scale, what people are looking for. My wife and I run an Airbnb. Doesn't sound like much. Well, in Airbnb, I have my Google Calendar linked to Airbnb, so that when somebody books through Airbnb, it shows up in my Google Calendar. Right now, in my Google Calendar, it shows me the person's first name, their last name, and the information about their booking. On Monday, I got a notification from Airbnb that as of December the 1st, they will still pass the data to my Google Calendar, excluding the person's name. All it will show in my Google Calendar is the date that they booked for and their number, their confirmation number that I have to go back into Airbnb to look up. So even Airbnb is saying, we don't want to pass this whole data security thing, pass this data through an API over to another calendar. So you've got to think about this. If you're a dentist or you're whatever, and you're passing this kind of information through calendars and stuff, other things it's all rolling uphill, and you're going to have to, be careful in how you do these types of things. I mean, it's an example that just happened with us this week in the whole data security thing. And they said specifically it was because of data security of the individuals that were booking our property, that they didn't want it to show up in our Google Calendar, which obviously if it shows up in a Google Calendar, Google has access to, right? So it's going to be really big.
So not only do we have this big event specifically involving Facebook, which is the Cambridge Analytica situation, a debacle, however you want to describe it, but this is really specific only to Facebook. But of course, you remember, if you've been an FTC Guardian member for the last couple of years at least, you know that the ultimate big deal was GDPR, which went into effect on May 25 of last year, 2018. And this event is really cataclysmic. I can't think of a word that I think adequately describes the effect of GDPR. Because what we're seeing now is not only this California statute, which is generally referred to by commentators as GDPR light, going into effect on January 1, 2020, just about 3 months from now, 3.5 months from now. You see about 30 to 35 other states doing the same or the similar thing in terms of regulating data and privacy. So we're really in a situation where the world is changing. It will never go back to the sort of the Wild West 1 and the Wild West 1.0, and then the Wild West 2.0 really ended on the GDPR being in effect last year on May 25. We're not in the Wild West anymore. We're in 3.0, whatever that is, where everybody, every institution, every one of the players in the ad tech system is going to have to take ownership and be accountable and follow through on all this stuff.
Yeah.
And what the FTC has imposed on Facebook is just going to be sort of common practice for everybody else, really.
Yeah, and I want to throw out there that I mean, and I've never been in favor of it, and I know we have members who have asked me this gazillions of times. Is they want to start a website, they want to sell product, but they don't want to give their address. They kind of want to hide behind a screen. We are working our way away from being able to hide behind screens and having to be a lot more transparent in what we do, the types of business we run. I think it's okay these days to work from home, and you need to be able to say, I've got an address, I have a phone number, and I'm a business person operating. I believe that that's where we're going, because, so many times we have people, do I have to put my real address? Well, I mean, think about it. If you were on the other side of that equation, wouldn't you want to know how to reach the person you're doing business with? I know I do. I want to know how to reach them, whether it's a phone number, an address, who to call, email address, or something. So I think that as we move forward, this whole transparency thing, people are going to want to know who they're doing business with, and that comes with the data security, that comes with it, the terms of service, that comes with everything else.
So there we are. I think the big takeaway here, before we actually get to the takeaway slide, is that this is sort of a snapshot of what the world is going to be like in the next 2 or 3 years. And we certainly should be able, or should reasonably expect, our federal government to come up with its own own form of a data privacy, data security regime. So let's then proceed to the takeaways officially here with this slide. And we see then that Facebook's violation of this 2012 settlement order resulted in this 2019 order, $5 billion, largest settlement ever. Zuckerberg himself kicked out of any privacy decision making, which is pretty significant. And now these monitoring requirements imposed on Facebook are going to trickle down and be felt if you're an advertiser, regarding disclosure of your data practices, having to self-certify with the Facebook terms of service, and to be monitored and enforced by Facebook if you participate in their platform as an advertiser. And then finally, as we wrap up the presentation, tags, searchable tags for this presentation would be, of course, Facebook, online advertising, retargeted ads, and social media. So that is the end of my presentation. We can kill the.
No, just leave it on. Leave it on. Leave it on.
Leave it on, because I'm operating without my webcam here, so it's probably a good idea to leave it this way.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions. Ed says, so sellers will have no privacy. Sellers have privacy. We control the privacy. That's the problem. Is as a seller, you should want more transparency and a little bit less privacy. The problem is sellers have had so much privacy that we basically work under a cloak, and people buy and they don't know who they're buying from. Buyers are getting tired of that. I know I've always been tired of that. It's not something that I like to do. I never buy anything from somebody that I don't have a phone number or someplace. At least if I reach them in advance, if I'm going to spend any money, I call them in advance or support them in advance to find out about the product, because I'm not going to wind up buying, some product from some company in overseas that I have no idea where they are or if they support it. So, we need to watch that. The other thing was that somebody mentioned something about, please talk more about the GDPR coming in, or that coming out in January. We have a hangout on that. When is that hangout, Chip?
Yeah, right now I spent a fairly significant amount of time on that this past weekend, in fact, and it is scheduled for the first hangout in the month of November. So it'll give you all of the month of November and December to think about what you're going to do. And I'll tell you this right now: the general approach to that hangout is not to explain everything you probably need to know about the new statute, which would take probably another 6 to 8 or 10 sessions, the way we did with GDPR. Instead of doing all of that coverage, which we don't really have time to do prior to 2020, we're focusing on how to avoid coverage or regulation by this statute. And the statute has some exemptions that I think are going to be very attractive to almost everyone who's a member of FTC Guardian. One is that you make $25 million, you have $25 million or more a year in revenue. I'm not aware of any of our members who do that. So what I'm going to do on the first hangout in November is to present two approaches for avoiding regulation by the new statute in California. And then if you're successful in doing that, then we can sit back and see what the U.S. Congress is going to do that would supersede all of these state laws that are going along right now. So that's the approach, and you definitely should be tuned into that hangout.
Yeah, and one of the things that Chip has noticed is that a lot of other states are getting on the GDPR bandwagon. And what happens is when they get on this GDPR bandwagon, then the federal government gets involved and says, well, hey, California did it, Delaware did it, so-and-so did it. We should probably have something that's overreaching over the top of all of this so we still look like we're in control, right? So
right. And otherwise, but if you think about it, it's right now we're in a situation that's really almost impossible for companies to be in compliance because we have GDPR, which is brand new, and everybody spent a lot of time planning for GDPR. We certainly devoted a heck of a lot of time last year for it. But then right after it, you have California. Now it's about 35 other states with different approaches, slightly different. So what you have is what is called a patchwork of laws, and it's virtually impossible for business to comply with all of them, to even know what they say, right? They're sort of dealing with the same concepts, but they approach things a little bit differently. So what is needed is a federal statute that would supersede and replace all of the patchwork of state laws so that basically you've got GDPR and whatever the federal statute is. And you don't have to worry about 30 or 40 other states in the mix.
Yep.
That is being talked about right now in Washington. However, as you well know, there's very little business being conducted up there. But there's a lot of pressure on the U.S. Congress right now to get serious about doing something about data privacy and security that would eliminate this patchwork of state laws.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're good. That's all the questions I see. So we'll be. So the next hangout. What's the topic of the next hangout, real quick?
I can't remember. I've been working on several of them here. It may be. Look up. See if you can pull it up real quick.
Let me see if I have it.
I've really got some interesting ones. CGI influencers is one.
Yeah. I don't see it. Okay. Well, I don't have it handy. I thought I did, but I don't have it handy.
We've got meme curators. I don't know if it's the very next one, but we've got some fairly.
Well, it was in their email. Yeah, it was in their email. I just don't remember what it is off the top of my head. So it was in their email.
Yeah. So stay tuned. We're going to entertain.
Somebody just posted. Phil just posted it. FTC settlements show trend in increasing data security and accountability.
There you go. So it's sort of a relation to this particular hangout. Then we get into the creative ones in October.
Yep.
All right. Very well.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a very pleasant evening.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.